Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. First of all, good morning, everyone. My name is Cameron Blashka. I am the Customer Support Manager for Informer 4 and Informer 5. And today I'm very excited to be going through all of the nice new features that are in our Informer 5.5 release. We've got a few that I'll be going through today. So I hope you all are ready to see some of the newer features that we have to offer in this most recent release. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat panel. We won't be having a Q&A during this webinar, but our customer support team will be following up with anyone that leaves questions after our webinar finishes up. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first major feature that has been added in 5.5 is enhanced authentication security features. So this adds several new layers to make sure your Informer 5 system is secure as possible from external phishing attempts or brute forcing passwords and other kind of related security issues like that. So to show some of these off, the first one we have that we've recently added is there is now a flag to only allow a certain number of login attempts. So if a local user account tries to log into Informer right now 5 number of times and they fail to provide the correct password 5 times, they will now be locked out of their account and they will have to get a super user to basically unlock their account. So this protects against brute force attacks most obviously, just so someone can't keep trying the same passwords over and over and over again. The next one is how long that lockout is going to last. So if someone does fail to log into their account X number of times, how long do you want them to be locked out of their account? By default, it's going to lock them out for 60 minutes. This is configurable depending on how long or how short you want them to be locked out. There is also a way to basically reset the lockout period. So again, if someone does get locked out, you'll be able to navigate to their user account, and in their user options, you will have an option to basically unlock their account, which will then allow them to try logging in again. Again, it plays very nicely with preventing any sort of brute force attempts of getting into the system. This is specific to local Informer users. So if you have a user set up local to Informer 5, not using domain authentication or SAML authentication, that's what these security features are going to work for primarily. The next security option that I wanted to talk about is the time until they are required to reset their password. So this is a pretty standard security feature, which it's great now that we can work this into Informer 5, where you can set their password to expire after X number of days. So if you have any sort of domain standards of security across your entire network where users have to reset their passwords, even their network passwords after 90 days or so, you can also use that inside of Informer 5. So by default, it's going to set it to 90 days. If you want them to last longer, obviously you could bump this up to 180 or 365 if you wanted to expire it after a year, anything like that. Another security feature that has been added is the ability to send a forgotten password email to any accounts that have an email address configured with them. So to show this off, I'm going to go ahead and try to log in as a local user, and you'll see now that there is a forgot password link that you can click. And from here, you can type in any username in the system. And as long as that username is associated with an email address, they'll get an email sent to their email address with steps on how to reset their Informer password. Again, this is specific for local users that have an email address configured on their account. So just keep that in mind. It's a very nice feature in the event that your user forgets their local passwords. Like if you have a local user and they're trying to use network credentials or something along those lines, it's always useful to have a way to reset their local passwords if you need to. Another security feature that has been added is the ability to use multi-factor authentication. Right now, we provide a time expiration token, so it is a time-based one-time password. You may have heard these through Google Authentication or Authy. Those are some of the bigger tools that use a time-based one-time password. So if you enable multi-factor authentication, it's going to apply to every account in the system. And when they go to log in, they'll basically be prompted with a QR code to set up their MFA tool. So if I were to save here and try to log in as a different user, let's just say a Blinken. And the first time we go to log in, it's going to prompt with a QR code. And from here, this is where I would take a picture of this QR code with my phone through one of these MFA apps, so Google Auth or Authy or a number of other ones. And I would set up my multi-factor authentication for my Informer account. And then every subsequent time that I try to log in, I would get prompted to go to my phone and authorize the login attempt. So again, just additional layers of security to make sure that your Informer 5 system is as secure as possible. I'm going to say no thanks there, and we will hop back to our admin page and just disable that again. Again, very, very flexible. And if there are other multi-factor authentication tools that you're interested in, let us know. We're always excited to add more features to Informer 5, and especially if our end users are asking about that. So you can always drop us a line and let us know if you're interested. So I will save that change there. All right, so that about wraps it up for the major security options. The next thing that I want to go into, which again we've put in a lot of work to get it into our 5.5 release, is our internationalization features. So now, once you log in to Informer 5.5, if you go up to your user profile settings, you'll see that there is a way to change your text language. As an example, we support right now, we have German, we have Mexican Spanish, and we have Canadian French. And if you change to any of these languages, you'll see that it converts all of the words inside of the UI to match that language. This makes it very, very easy for some of our global customers to use the product. And we're very, very excited, and it's going to convert any keywords that you see in the Informer 5 UI to match the language that you've set to. Obviously, if you've named certain data sets or reports using a different language, those pieces of content won't automatically be translated, but everything else specific to the Informer 5.5 UI will get translated to the language that you've selected. So I'm going to switch back over to English, and we'll see that it converts everything again. As a part of these internationalization features, Informer 5.5 can also detect whatever your browser's locale is set to and change some of the data formatting inside the Informer 5 UI based off of your browser locale. So what exactly does this mean? The best example, the best way to show you this is with some of the date formats. So you'll notice if I'm looking at this data set, I have the standard American way of formatting these dates. So I have month / day / year. But again, for some of our global customers, even if they are in English-speaking countries, such as Canada or Australia, they use different date formats. So these new internationalization features let you change your browser locale, and Informer 5 will automatically pick up that browser locale and format dates accordingly. So I'm going to hop into my browser settings, and obviously, depending on your browser, the settings can be different here and there. But let's go in here and change my language settings. So I will just change this to, for example, we'll set this to UK, United Kingdom. Oh, there we go. Let's set that to Great Britain English. So if I change that here, if I set this back to Great Britain English and add you and select that, and now if I go back to my browser, I'll see that I have a new option. It's now changed. If I look at my text settings, let's hop back here to the main page. So those date formats will switch over so that they now use date/month/year. And again, that's all based off of your browser locale. So Informer is going to pick up wherever your browser is configured to display, and it's going to change its date localization to use that new format. It's not just going to apply to how the data looks inside of data sets or ad hoc query reports, but it'll also affect things like inputs. So if you have an input based off of some sort of date field, when your users go to provide a value for that input, they'll use whatever their browser locale is set to. So month, day, year, or day, month, year, however they have that set up. So again, all of that is part of our new internationalization features that are available in this 5.5 release. The next major feature that I'd like to go over is our global search bar. So you may have noticed as I've been navigating around in the UI, the search bar is no longer just in the top right, but we have it front and center up here at the top. And it's got two great new features. One of them is the recently viewed options. So if I click this drop-down arrow, you'll see a list of everything that I have recently viewed in the system. This makes it very, very easy to navigate around and find what you need and what you use most frequently. So if I wanted to hop straight back into a data set that I was just visiting, all I need to do is go to my global search, click the drop down, and click into my data set. Or for example, if I'm trying to edit a job on this particular data set and I double click into the job, now instead of having to go back to the home screen, click back into data sets, and then click back into the data set I wanted to look at, I can just hop up to my global search bar and see that, oh, hey, look, I have my data set. I'm gonna click straight back into it. And it's not just limited to data sets or reports. I can also navigate around to all of the different parts of the system that I've recently looked at. So if I need to hop over to the admin settings, or if I need to modify some of my user fields, which we'll talk about in a little bit, or if I need to modify any sort of security that I have set up on a specific user, I can do all of that with a single click back up into the global search bar and then clicking into the content that I want to view again. It makes navigating around the system very, very easy. The other major change that global search offers is if I start to search for any sort of content in the system, the resulting dialog is now a lot more comprehensive. So aside from just listing all of the content that matches the inputted term, I can filter it based on what type of content I want to see. So if I want to find something that contains the word order, I'll see on the main all tab, I see the data sets, I see my jobs, any sort of mappings, and lastly, any sort of fields. If I want to have that a bit more organized, I can click into data sets to just show the data sets that match the word order. Or the other category is going to show jobs, basically anything that doesn't fall into a data set or report or data source is going to go onto the other category. Lastly, I have this data sources tab where it will show me all of the data source specific content that matches my search term. So this is going to be your mappings, your fields, and your links. So to change this term up a little bit, if I type in student, I'll see now that I have a report tab. Before, when I was using the order search term, I didn't have any reports that contained the word order. So I didn't have a reports tab. But now I can see I have a reports tab, and this makes it very, very easy to find the content that you're looking for, especially if you haven't recently accessed it. So let's say I have a data set called recent orders, but I haven't clicked into it, but I do know the name of it. I can just type that in my global search bar and very easily filter the resulting options. So it's pretty great now that you can click around and navigate through the UI, find the content that you use most frequently, and hop straight into it without having to click around in the UI too much. All right, so speaking of queries, I'm going to hop over to one of the ad hoc queries I've got in the system to show off the new ad hoc query parameters bar. So I'm going to click into this student awards report. And right now, this ad hoc query was run wide open. I didn't provide any sort of input parameters at runtime. So I'm seeing all of the results that came back from this particular query. But the ad hoc query parameters bar is a new addition in Informer 5.5, and this gives you and your end users a quick reference to see which input values were last used on this particular query. So we can see here that I have an option to click if I want to enter more parameters. So I'm going to click into this, and let's say I only want to see records where the award category is GSL or USTF. So right now, this is a pretty standard input option. I'm going to go ahead and run this query. And what you'll notice once the query finishes running is my ad hoc query parameters bar is now going to show those two input values. And the fact that they're up there now tells obviously myself and other end users that are utilizing this report which parameters were last used to fetch results. So now it's a lot easier to see what data a given report has, especially if you have a query that has lots of different inputs and lots of different potential options for those inputs. It can sometimes be a little bit confusing to remember, all right, which input values did I use on this query? What data am I actually looking at right now? But now with this ad hoc query parameters bar, you have a very, very quick reference of what was used to fetch these results. If you ever need to change them, you can always click into modify parameters, and that will pull up an input box with your query inputs again, and it will let you type in whatever values you need. So let's say I wanted to change this, so I'm only looking at GSL again. It just gives you a very quick and easy way to display the parameters that back a result set and change the parameters right there within that parameters bar. So you don't have to be left wondering what input values you used when you ran a query the last time. Speaking of queries, this is a bit of a behind the scenes change, so there isn't really a great way to show this off in the webinar, but we made a lot of nice changes under the hood to alter how query payloads are served up. If any of you are longtime users of Informer 5, you may remember that if you change any sort of field metadata, such as the data type of a field, or if you changed a link, for example, like which field it started in and which field it went to, you may remember that you had to drop and re-add that content in order for your query to pick them up. But we made some changes available in 5.5 where you no longer have to drop and re-add content to your queries for Informer to pick up those changes. Basically, the query payloads are updated at runtime now, and so every single time you run a query, it's going to fetch whatever the latest metadata is. It makes it a lot easier to make those back-end changes without having to alter your queries. Again, not an easy way to show that in this webinar, but you'll have to believe me, but it's a pretty highly asked about feature because there are times where you just have to change the metadata backing a query and you don't want to have to drop and re-add content to it. So that's a really great change. The next feature that I would like to show off is another highly requested one dealing with user fields. So user fields are a great way to kind of enforce a row level security approach to sharing data in the system. So you could always set up a user field, and that's basically going to create a field on every single user in the system where you can configure values, and then you can set up criteria or filters to use those values. And as of 5.5, you've now got the ability to configure multiple values per user field. So in this example, I have set up a country user field and I have keyed it to 2 specific terms. So now if I impersonate myself and I go to look at let's say in this example, a data set, I can have a user filter, a saved filter configured on this data set specific to my user fields, and I can filter it now. So now instead of seeing all of the results, I'm seeing just the results that match my user field values. In this situation, it would be France and Germany. So again, this is, it seems like it's a minor fix, but it's actually quite expansive because it gives power users and administrators a lot more flexibility in how they are securing data throughout the system. So now the fact that you can have multiple values keyed to every single user field means that there's a lot more options that you can do as you're setting up security. So it's not just row security, but now you can have saved filters configured, you can have criteria configured against these basically multi-value user fields. So it's a pretty nice enhancement. Since we are in a data set, let me actually leave this impersonate session and go back to my data set. One of the other features that has been added in Informer 5.5 is enhanced dataset copying. It gives you, speaking of kind of flexibility, it gives you a lot more options when you are actually copying your dataset. So previously, when you would copy your dataset, it would copy the metadata and you could rerun it and reconfigure it however you needed to. Now, when you go to copy a dataset, you will have options to also copy any indexed data, copy any saved visuals built off of that dataset, copy any saved filters that are a part of that dataset, or copy the basically security that has been configured on that dataset. So if you want to take an exact clone of everything that a dataset has in it and make a copy of it, you can do that now with these enhanced dataset features. This is particularly helpful, I mean, needless to say, in situations where you have pretty complex security set up in the system, but we also have a number of customers that have particularly large data sets that they've populated with data over the span of weeks and weeks and weeks, like historical data, those sorts of things. And it's not particularly feasible to have to repopulate that data set from scratch. So I personally like the indexed data copy feature the most, just because it lets you copy all of the data that is backing a data set and you don't have to worry about rerunning everything. So if I were to copy this one, it's going to take me straight into a copy of the data set and it's already populated with all of the same data. I don't have to worry about repopulating it with anything. So I think that's particularly awesome, but all of these dataset copy features are great, especially like I said, if you have complicated security setups or you have a lot of custom saved filters and you don't want to have to go through the steps of recreating those on a copied dataset. So one of the last features that I wanted to show off is the enhanced logging options. So we're going to hop over to administration, and this has been another highly requested feature, not just externally from customers, but internally with our support team, is enhanced logging. So now with Informer 5.5, you have these categories, and each category basically has a different log level that you can configure. So if we look at this log level dialog here, it basically starts at information, which is just your top level information about what's happening in the system. And the further down the list we get, the more granular the logging is going to be. So we have our system application, logic and events, we have Elasticsearch queries, and we have our dataset queries. So each of these determine basically the type of information that you want to get back, and then the log level that you set up determines the specific amount and basically how much information you want to get sent back. This isn't just helpful for determining on your end what might be going on behind the scenes, basically a peek behind the curtain. But it also helps if you run into any sort of issues with queries or you're running into any errors. It makes it easier for our support team to help you all out. So it's a lot faster to get some of this logging information and send it over our way, and we can kind of dig through things. There are also the console logs, which depending on the log settings that you have set up, determines what exactly you're able to see in these console logs. So basically, if you want to see some real-time logs scrolling through, you'll be able to use these console log settings. All right, so I want to make sure I didn't miss out on any of these new features. Again, we're very excited to be able to present some of these newer features for you all. We hope you all kind of dive in and start using them. Again, if there are any questions about some of these newer features or anything at all, really, feel free to leave that in the chat, and our customer support team will be able to follow up with you afterwards. I hope you all had a great time today, and it was my pleasure kind of presenting some of the awesome new features that Informer 5.5 has to offer, and I hope everybody has a great day.